So what I'm going to cover now are two different concepts in Python. The first one being two-dimensional lists, and the second one being nested for loops, so we can navigate through those two-dimensional lists. Normally, if I would be to create a list, let's call it numGrid, I could just have the list, and then I could start inputting numbers into it. So for example, 1, 5, 2, and on. However, we're going to create a two-dimensional list, which means we're going to put lists inside of a list instead of those numbers. To do that, it's actually quite simple. You simply have to input new lists inside of the list instead of those numbers. At the beginning, let's create a list with 1, 2, and 3 in it. Then let's add a second list with 4, 5, and 6. A third one last list at the end, which will only have 0. And if you want to access those numbers now, you can simply use the print command, use the name of the list, and then you actually have to give two values. The first one being the rows, so which element is it on the actual numGrid list. So this would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So let's say 0 to access the first row. And then just after that, you have to give a second value, which is going to identify the index inside of that nested list. So if you want to access 1, it would be 0. If you want to access 2, it's 1. And if you want to access 3, it's 2. So let's say 0, run the file, and as you can see, we have accessed 1. Same way we can access any other value. So for example, 2 and 2 should be 9, and as you can see, it's 9. Now we're actually going to create a nested loop, which is going to loop through each of those rows and columns and print out one by one all of the numbers. To start with, let's create our first loop, which is going to loop for rows in our numGrid. And actually, I could already print out rows, and while running the file, it would print out all of the lists inside of that list. However, that's not what we want to do. We want to print out each number individually. We actually have to create a nested for loop. So that would be a for loop inside of a for loop. So we're going to create a for loop, which loops for columns in our rows, and we're going to print out the column. I can run the file now, and as you can see, everything's working fine, and we have looped through each of these numbers. And yeah, that's it. See ya.